Alright, hello everyone and welcome to Duncan's mock test. We're going to get started here in just 1 second. In the top left of the screen you'll see the minor and serious count, also known as driving faults these days. We'll see how Duncan gets on in, well, a few minutes time hopefully. I'll spare you the result for now. We're just going through one of the tell me questions at the moment. I ask him about the headrest. Gives me a bit of a long-winded answer, but with a little bit of probing and a little bit of a nudge from me, he does get the correct answer, which is that the middle of your headrest, the rigid part, should be in line with the middle of your head. We're going to start out the test today with his manoeuvre. I'm going to get him to do a reverse bay park in just a moment. It's rare that they get you to do this at the start of the test, but I have seen it happen, and unfortunately Duncan's going to be thrown into that straight away today because I was clearly in a very nice mood. Before he moves off here, he is going to make a good 360 observations around the car, which is fantastic. So he's not going to pick up any faults just yet. See him moving off in just a moment here. He has very sensibly decided to go and choose one of the bays that is empty at the end, rather than using any of the rather tricky looking ones back there. I did get him to pause a little bit early in the hopes that I might catch him out, but I've not done that, which is good. Tries to line himself up initially. Now he does get a little bit confused here. You won't see it on the video just yet, but he has lined himself up with his forward bay park reference point, and as you'll see in just a moment, it's not gonna end quite as well as he hopes here. Now unfortunately Duncan has just picked up his first serious fault. He's lined himself up thinking correctly, but unfortunately before he's moved off here he's changed direction into reverse gear and he's not carried out his blind spot observations, which is a shame because he actually did fantastic observations on the way back here. So unfortunately, although we are only a minute in, we have been caught out here already. Gotta get those blind spot checks done. Now about here you can see Duncan's realised that he's not quite lined himself up correctly. Duncan does the correct thing here, which is simply to readjust the manoeuvre. If you finish outside the lines, serious fault. Readjusting the manoeuvre, however, will only lead to a driver fault. Not the end of the world, nothing to stress about, as long as you do all your observations. He does his 360 observations, including his blind spots as he pulls forwards here. He then lines himself up in the exact same place again. At this point, I am quite nice, and I just simply ask him, "What's your reference point for this, Duncan?" And he realises what I'm trying to say there, and you'll see he does correct himself in just a moment and lines up with his reverse bay park reference point. There's a little correction just there. This one looks a lot better now. Looking good from this point. The control he had was absolutely fantastic. His observations all around the car as he was moving here were fantastic. But again, at this point, although I can only mark it once on the test, he does unfortunately do the exact same thing, which shows me it isn't just a one-off. He does forget to do his blind spot checks again here before he moves backwards, which is a real shame because he did all of his blind spot checks for his correction, was looking good, and just about here, as he's doing the correction, he's not done those blind spot checks, and so again, would have picked up a serious fault if he hadn't already done so here. On the bright side, he does actually do a rather fantastic bay park. He's beautifully positioned inside the lines there. Little corrections just to the left and right as he's finishing it off. There is a tricky little drain just in front of us here on this one, which can be a little bit awkward. But he has managed to navigate that quite successfully, put himself beautifully inside the lines, and that, apart from the blind spot checks, was us almost off to a very good start. So, carrying on from here, I do ask him to move off. I'm just explaining to him how we're going to get out of the car park. There's quite a few directions that come at once here, so again, I'm quite nice to him and decide to give him a little bit of a hand to get them all sorted out at once. Again, when he moves off here, he is going to carry out some good observations all around the car. He does do a good job of waiting for this warrior in front of us as well to manoeuvre out of the way, which is good. No pedestrians or anything exciting other than that to worry about just now though. I'm going to get moving in just a second here. We're going to be heading out of the car park back round to the left. Now Duncan does seem to get a little bit confused here. Not too sure why, but you'll see I think he got a bit confused about whether we had to go out of this little bit. I do clarify it's just to the left. As we're coming back onto the main road, you'll see that it is merging onto a dual carriageway. There is a little blue arrow pointing to the left, which means that is the only way that you can go. He does do this. I have told him that we are turning left at the end of the road, just to help him out anyway. As we do emerge from the junction here, unfortunately Duncan has left the car in second gear, which results in a rather nasty stall as we come out of the junction. He's gotten a little bit lucky here that the junction was so quiet, because this could very easily have been a serious fault. It could just be examiner's judgment anyway with how far he's rolled into the junction here. I have put it down as a minor, seeing how empty the road was, but it is completely situational. It could very, very easily have been a serious fault here. On the approach to the next roundabout, I have asked Duncan to go straight ahead. You're going to see he actually does a rather nice job of this roundabout. He checks his mirrors. As we're on the approach, we are going straight ahead, so we don't need a signal onto the roundabout. The speed limit on this road is about 30 miles an hour. I say about, in fact it is exactly 30 miles an hour. It does bring his speed down nicely for the roundabout. Given the size of the roundabout and how empty it is, you'll see it is very empty on the approach here. We have slowed down a tiny bit early, but it's not a driving fault, just an advisory. He does a brilliant job with his position here. He positions very far over to the left. He doesn't actually need to go quite that far over, but there's nothing wrong with it. However, unfortunately, he has just picked up his third minor because he's forgotten to signal off the roundabout. When we're going straight ahead at a roundabout, we don't need a signal on the approach, but we do need to check our mirrors middle and left and signal left as we're exiting the roundabout. On the approach to the next roundabout is where things start to go a little bit wrong. We're going to see a theme start to develop now with Duncan's roundabouts. Again, I've asked him to go straight ahead here. Now, I want you to have a good look at the roundabout as we approach it here, and tell me how many cars you see that are going to come around the roundabout and block us off. Because there are currently none on the right hand side. There's a red Mini who is not signalling and thus going straight ahead. And you'll see Duncan, unfortunately, really unnecessarily comes to a stop here. There were one or two vehicles that appeared on the right hand side at the Tesco entrance there, but they were all signalling left to come round. And even then we had 3 or 4 cars in a row from straight ahead, which were all blocking those cars from moving. We had plenty of opportunities to go there, and so unfortunately that is definitely a minor for undue hesitation. With how long we did wait there, again, it could even be examiner's judgment there about whether that would be a serious fault or not. I've put it down as a minor for now, but we'll see what sort of themes develop throughout the remainder of the test. As we come along here now, the speed limit has increased to 40 miles an hour. Duncan does make very good progress up to this. He speeds along quite nicely, gets quite comfortably up to the speed limit without exceeding it, and sits there for the remainder of this road. So that road gave Duncan no problem at all. He quite comfortably kept up to the speed limit there without exceeding it, which is fantastic. We are now approaching another roundabout, at which I have asked Duncan to turn right. Now, again, I'd like you to have a little look at the roundabout and see how many cars you think you stop for. As we approach the roundabout, Duncan does do a good job of checking his mirrors and putting a signal on. Again, he slowed down quite nicely on the approach, possibly a little bit too much, a little bit too early, but again, not a driving fault. At this point we can see there are a couple of cars, and that's okay. He does have to stop very briefly. I think there is one more car that does come around from the right hand side here. There it is, but after this we have 1, 2, it almost goes there, there's another third one, a 4th car, all of these are going straight ahead. On top of that there were 3 cars to that right hand side, all of who were signalling left. You can see how many cars have already chose to go on our left hand side, probably about 4 or 5 there possibly. So again, unfortunately Duncan does pick up another minor here for undue hesitation, as there were far too many gaps that we've missed there. On the bright side, he does do a lovely job of checking his mirrors and popping his signal on as we emerge from the roundabout. This next corner has caught a few people out in the past. You can see we've got the black and white barrier there. It is a little bit of a sharp corner. Just need to make sure you bring your speed down enough to keep it on your side of the road, keep it nice and controlled for the turn there, which Duncan does fantastically. You can see we're down to a really good speed there. I've just asked him to take the second road on the right, so not this first one with the blue sign here, but the one just after that. We do get our own dedicated right-hand turn lane for this turn. The trick here is it can be a little bit difficult to spot that you have to give way to the traffic coming around the corner now. Plus you get these dotted lines on the right hand side and the little bollard with the blue arrow on, all of which indicate you have to go to the left hand side of that bollard. Duncan does find first gear a tiny bit early there, but corrects himself nicely, doesn't stall and manages to pull himself all the way up to the line there. He waits very nicely for the oncoming traffic before deciding to take a very good gap. He also does a lovely hill start here as well. It can be, again, a little bit of a tricky one, a little bit of pressure sometimes to get himself going. The good thing about his hesitation here is he does a fantastic job of not being pressured into taking any unsafe gaps. He waits until a very good gap appears, which I believe is just after this white car. Beautiful hill start, and away we go. Shortly, I'm going to ask Duncan to take the next road on the left. Not this first one just here, but the second one coming up, where you can see the white car emerging now. He does a good job of this, checks his mirrors, puts his signal on in good time. They quite like to bring candidates along here to do a hill start, and as you can imagine, that is exactly what I'm going to get Duncan to do. Does a good job of the turn, has a great speed for it, finds second gear, no problem at all here. As we come up here, I have just about asked Duncan now to find a safe place to pull up on the left. He does get a little bit confused for a second, he's not too sure where he's allowed to stop. I do suggest that he pulls over by the trees. Now keep an eye out on his position here. It might be a little bit hard to tell from the camera, but unfortunately at this point you can just see the bump there. He has mounted the curb there with both the front and the back wheels. Now, unfortunately that is at least a serious fault. If it's a gentle tap, you might get away with it, but unfortunately a full-on mounting of the curb is definitely a serious, and examiner's judgment could potentially even be a dangerous fault there. So that is Duncan's second serious fault of the day. On the good side, he does do a fantastic job here of making those good 360-degree observations. He remembers his blind spot checks, he waits for a good gap in the traffic. He does roll back ever so slightly there, but he takes a breath. It's okay, he's not rolled back so far that it was worth a fault. Collects himself, finds his gears, and does a fantastic hill start just after that. At the next roundabout now, Duncan has been asked to go straight ahead. It's a little bit of a funny roundabout, this one. It's more of an oval about than a roundabout, but it works exactly the same. You don't have to worry quite as much about your position here. There aren't really too many lanes to worry about sticking to. We'll see how his hesitation looks at this one though. Are there any cars here that we have to wait for? We do see the blue one coming round, so he is correct in stopping here. And the white one. Does he get himself moving off this, however? Ooh, he's thinking about it. And he does indeed, so no faults on this roundabout. Duncan has managed this quite correctly. Checks his mirrors, signals off, no problem at all here. I'm going to get Duncan now to do an angled start, which is where they're going to get you to pull up quite close, about a car's length away from a car in front of you, and then ask you to move off. I do ask him to pull in behind this blue car, which he gets a bit confused about. I think the word behind there was a bit weird because the car's parked the other way. Not a problem, I just get him to pull in behind the white car instead, which he does. Again, checks his mirrors, no problem, signals, no problem. This time, he does miss the curb, which is good. Probably a bit put off from hitting it a few moments ago. Again, he doesn't have any issues with this. I'm just getting him to nudge a little bit closer here to do the angled start properly. No issues here. He's going to do all of his checks. He's going to pop signal on, and everything is going to be good. Trick with the angled start here, of course, being just use that clutch control. Keep your speed super low until you're clear of the car in front of you, which he's going to do a fantastic job of. He almost chose to go there, saw a little wobble, and then he spots the cars, takes his time. And it's all good. He does wait for a nice gap here before choosing to go. Can be a little bit of a busy road. Again, if there's not a gap, don't rush, there's no pressure, take your time, look for a safe gap, which he does beautifully, emerge when it's safe. On the approach to this next roundabout, Duncan is unfortunately going to pick up a couple of serious faults in quick succession. Now again, as we approach the roundabout, he is going to pick up another minor for undue hesitation. You'll see there really isn't anything worth stopping for from the right hand side. The car that does appear, we would definitely have beaten. Duncan is going to make an interesting decision here, which is going to have some consequences. So he does go for second gear, which is a good choice. We can see the red car is going to come past. There's nothing to our right hand side at the moment. At this point we should be putting the power on and getting into the roundabout. He doesn't do that. He comes to a stop unnecessarily, but he does stop slightly over the line. At this point I would have liked him to have gone, but for some reason he does choose to roll back into the junction here, and you can see the grey car behind us is very confused. We do wait for that black car, so there's a minor hesitation there. There's a serious fault there for rolling back in an uncontrolled manner. He's not looked behind him. We have caused confusion to that grey car as well. The second fault he's about to pick up here is you'll see he does get far too close to the middle of the roundabout. Just there, I have to pull the wheel away from him to stop him from hitting the curb, and again as we come round he does the same thing there, and I have to pull him away again to stop the car from going into the middle of the roundabout there. So unfortunately, 2 serious faults in quick succession at that roundabout. Shortly, I'm going to get Duncan to take the next road on the left, which is just after the traffic lights. After we do that, I'm going to get him to pull up on the left. He does do this junction quite nicely. Again, mirror check, signals in good time. Duncan's junction work is really quite good. Nothing of concern here at all. We are going to get slightly further down the road. Again, there's a little bit of a hill start here. I'm not intending to get him to do a hill start. If we get a little bit further across the ridge of the hill there, then, as I believe we do here, I'm not going to be too harsh and make him do 2 hill starts in the same test. He's already proven he's more than capable of those, so nothing to stress about here. However, as we approach the curb here, you're going to see as he pulls up, again, he is going to get far too close. I believe we're going to pull up just after this junction. He does time his signal well. We don't signal before the junction, but as we get towards the curb here, you're going to see I really have to pull the wheel away from him sharply at the end, or we were going to have a very vicious encounter with that curb. Now, the examiners on the test will usually just let you hit the curb, but if we'd have hit the curb at that speed, at that angle, there was a very, very strong chance that I would have lost a tyre there. So I did unfortunately pull the wheel away from him to prevent damage to the car and also any pedestrians that could have been passing. At this point, I think we're just having a little bit of a breather, trying to collect ourselves a little bit. A few things have obviously gone wrong in the last couple of minutes, and sometimes you just need to chill out for a couple of minutes. And again, if this happens on the test, don't beat yourself up about it. It's okay to pull over, to take a breather, have a couple of minutes to just go, take that deep breath, put everything that's happened behind you, and just get on with the rest of the drive, because you really don't know what's going to happen until you get back to the test centre. Okay, I've asked Duncan to move off when it is safe to do so, whenever he feels ready. He does do good observations here, makes good 360 observations around the car, including his blind spot checks, and he's going to wait for a great gap here. Nothing wrong with his moving off just yet. Can be a little bit of a busy road this one, so he's absolutely justified in taking his time, again, waiting for those good gaps. If you have to sit there and wait for a gap, you have to sit there and wait for a gap. You can't just wave a magic wand and make there be no traffic. Duncan does a great job waiting for the traffic to clear here before he chooses to move off. Coming up to the end of the road here, I've asked Duncan to turn left. You'll note the time here is about 20 to 5 on a Monday afternoon. It can be a little bit busy, it's getting on towards rush hour now. This junction in particular can be a little bit unpleasant to deal with. Duncan does a really nice job of this. Again, mirrors and signal all on point. He also does a fantastic job of positioning himself at this junction. He follows that curb very tightly around to the left hand side, which would have left room for somebody on our right hand side if they needed it. It is quite busy, as you can see on the right hand side. You often get a lot of traffic waiting to turn right here just afterwards as well, down Elmwood Road. We're not going that way today. Duncan does a really good job here, waits for a gap in the traffic, waits for everybody to clear, positions in exactly the right place behind the line, waits for a great gap, and once all the traffic is cleared, emerges into the junction without any hesitation at all, looking really good. I've decided to be slightly nice to Duncan here and not take him down the giant hill there. The downside is I have brought him along to this next right hand turn, which if you've not seen it before can be a little bit weird. I've asked him to take the next road on the right here. Now you'll note it looks like there are 2 entrances that you can turn down before you get to the one you're actually allowed to turn into. You'll note there are double lines and bollards across each of these entrances, all pointing to the left, which says do not go down this road. That is the oncoming lane, turning both ways. You have to go as far forward as Duncan has very correctly done here. He does position himself a little bit over to the left to start with, but he does bring it back over. He's made his life a little bit difficult by going this far forward, but it's not a driving fault. He's just going to have to steer a little bit sharply to make up for it. You can see he's having to take his time to manage his steering there, but again, although it would be advisory to position himself a little bit further back, he's done a nice job of managing the turn there. In just a moment, I've asked him to pull up on the left-hand side of the road. He does seem to get a little bit confused when I do this. He seems to think that it's some sort of trick question. It's not. You can pull up anywhere along here, there are no markings suggesting otherwise. Can sometimes be a little bit busy. The good thing he does here is he does check his mirrors and signal all before he starts slowing down, which is great because it gives the traffic behind us plenty of time to realise what's happening. Now, again, I've asked him to move off when it's safe to do so. This was a particularly interesting one because, although we haven't got the audio from inside the car, Duncan is about to pick up a serious fault. And the reason for this is he goes to move off just here. Now check when he starts moving. He starts rolling, and as this white car comes past, Duncan in fact says out loud, "Oh, that's weird, I didn't see him." Reason for that being, Duncan, you didn't check your right blind spot, which is of course another serious fault. At the next roundabout, I've asked Duncan to go straight ahead. Now, back to the theme of the roundabouts. It is a little bit hard to see, but the white vehicle approaching our right hand side does have a signal onto the left here. Not only that, the grey Polo coming from across was going straight ahead, providing a beautiful blocker and gap for us to go. White car's just gone left, still a gap here. Black car's also blocking, still a gap here. Again, we've come to this roundabout and no cars have passed in front of us, but we've come to a stop. This is Duncan's fourth minor for undue hesitation. Again, some of those could have been serious, but as we have got 4 minors now for the same thing, at this point it does now go down as a serious fault for habitual faults of undue hesitation. So, unfortunately Duncan, still a little bit of work to do on those roundabouts. Gotta tidy those up. Need to be looking for those gaps a little bit earlier. Trust the cars, don't just look at the cars, look at the signals. Coming up to some traffic lights in a moment, I'm going to ask him to go straight ahead. There are 2 lanes to choose from here. It's a little bit unusual because the straight ahead lane is on the right hand side. He does notice this and positions himself correctly in good time. Something to be aware of coming up to, not these lights just here, but the ones we are going to come to in just a moment, is that there is a filter arrow pointing to the left for the traffic going into the Tesco car park. Can be a little bit tricky sometimes, if that does go green, to not be caught out and also try and go yourself. Duncan does do something very odd in a moment though. Once these lights do go green, he's going to correctly move into the junction, but keep an eye out on the lanes ahead. You'll notice that the black car that just turned in front of us there came from that middle lane. This middle lane is in fact the oncoming lane to turn into Tesco. When Duncan gets himself going here, he's going to forget all about that, and he's going to get a little bit confused about where he's going. You can see that the filter light has just come onto the left there now, allowing the traffic to turn into Tesco. Duncan, very correctly, doesn't go at this point, waits for his light to go green. I don't have to help him with this at all. As we do get ourselves moving here though, in just a second, you'll notice that Duncan is going to make absolutely no effort at all to move to the left here, and is in fact, without any intervention, about to drive straight towards that white car coming towards us. At this point, I leave it as late as I can, but I do have to pull the wheel here to bring him away from that lane because he just wasn't making any sort of effort to get out of the way there. Unfortunately, another serious fault for lane discipline at this point. Could possibly go down as a dangerous fault, in fact, with the white car being in our way there. At the next mini roundabout, Duncan is asked to turn right. At this point, we've already got our 3 marks and our minor, and our serious there for undue hesitation. Now, Duncan does do the right thing here, which is to approach this roundabout quite slowly. It is a lot more blind on the right-hand side than it looks. You'll see how quickly those cars appear. He's absolutely right to have stopped for these first couple of cars, but what you're going to see now is 1, 2, 3 separate cars all turning left here, all with their signals on, even the black car here. Plenty of opportunities to go. No cars getting in our way there. At this point we do have a couple of cars that come round, but we've already missed 3 gaps. If there was any room left for me to add minors here, he would have had another minor here for undue hesitation. On the test, the way it's marked, once you do get the serious fault for it, you'll only get 1 in that category, and that will be all that they'll mark down. But it is important to point out that had we not already had that, this would have been the one that pushed it over the edge. We're now approaching the rather infamous Myrekirk roundabout. I've asked Duncan to turn right at this roundabout, which is, in my opinion, the most difficult way to go here. Again, it is a little bit busy with it being rush hour. Can be a bit of a difficult one, however, the traffic lights do take a lot of the guesswork out of when the gaps are there at least. Duncan does position himself very nicely to start with. He's gone for the right lane, he has a right signal on, it's all looking good to start with. Now, the best way to handle this roundabout, I like to think about it a bit like the Wizard of Oz, where you have to follow the yellow brick road, apart from we're aiming for the orange bit of road instead. Duncan isn't going to do that here, and you'll see how it's not always a driving fault, but how he does make his life a little bit risky. He's living life on the edge here because it could have been on a different day a serious fault. He is going to pick up a minor here, and you'll see why soon enough. As he comes around the roundabout, I'll explain the best way to position himself. He's going to keep himself all the way on the right hand side, which unfortunately is going to force him, as it is a dual carriageway on the exit, it's going to force him to exit in the right hand lane. The preferable way to do this roundabout is to come round, move into the orange bit of road as you do come round towards the lights at about the 12 o'clock position from here, and that will mean you're able to exit in the left hand lane and not have anybody else ruin your day. Duncan's position is great at the moment. He does need to start on his right hand side and keep himself nice and close to the middle. Exactly the right position here, but what I'd like to see him doing now is checking his mirrors and moving into this orange bit of road like the black car in front of us has done. Unfortunately, Duncan sits in the right hand lane here, and you can see how that's now, because of the cars on our left hand side, going to force us to come off in the right hand lane as we exit onto the dual carriageway. This isn't necessarily a driving fault, however, as he is coming off in the fast lane, he will be expected now to build his speed up and to come back to the left as soon as it's safe to do so. Duncan does get a little bit lucky here, because you'll notice that on the left hand side behind us there is a rather large, slow vehicle, which does mean that he's not running the risk of anybody undertaking him. At this point I'd really like to see him making an effort to build his speed up. He's come onto a 50-mile-an-hour road and we're only at about 25-30 miles an hour. He does move himself back over, he does this nicely, he checks his mirrors, he signals, he does all the correct things, but I feel like we left it just a little bit too long and we didn't really make enough of an effort to speed up. Because of that, I've given him a minor for normal driving position. Again, on a different day, if there were faster cars in the left-hand lane, examiner's judgment, that could very easily go down as a serious fault. Try and get yourself to come off in the left-hand lane if it's at all possible to do so, and that will avoid anybody from ruining your day. Carrying on along the Kingsway now, it is a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. Duncan does a nice job of building his speed up here, eventually. He does make it up to the 50-mile-an-hour limit. The dash cam is showing about 43, 44 at the moment, but keep in mind the speedometer in the car is going to be reading a little bit higher than that, and he is sitting at an absolutely acceptable speed for the road along here. I've asked Duncan to take the next exit on the left-hand side. You'll see a brown sign coming up, it is just after that. This is a bit of an interesting slip road coming off the Kingsway here. It's weirdly quite a long slip road, so there really isn't too much need to slow down. You might not necessarily know that if you've not driven on it before, and it wouldn't be a driving fault if you did start slowing down a little bit too early for it, as long as you don't cause any impediment to the traffic surrounding you. He checks his mirrors, he signals nicely, and he exits very smoothly. No problem here at all. At the roundabout that is following this, in what's going to feel like a few miles time, but it's just at the end of the slip road, I've asked Duncan to turn right, third exit, and we're going to finish the test very soon after this, but before we do that we have some very interesting things that happen at this roundabout. He does very correctly note the lane markings. Obviously if we're turning right we should be in the right hand lane anyway. The problem Duncan has here on the approach to the roundabout, he's slowing down nicely, he's in second gear, but when we come to a stop here he's going to forget to put it back into first gear. Now, I think he might have been debating whether to stop or go here. It is a very busy roundabout, no issue at all with him stopping here, no issue at all with him waiting for a very safe gap. There are maybe one or two that were a little bit 50-50 that on a confident day we might have been able to take, but I didn't mark it as a fault at all. We were a little bit slow getting away here compared to the other ones. The problem I have here is that Duncan is still in second gear, he hasn't put it into first gear, and with how busy this roundabout is, I do have to intervene here. I do remind him that he's in second gear and that he does need to put it back into first gear. The reason that I have intervened here verbally is because I felt like if he was to enter the roundabout in second gear, with how busy it was, he was going to stall and we would just be a sitting duck in the middle of the roundabout and it wouldn't have been safe for us to do that. So I have marked this down as if it was a serious fault for gears. You can see the ambulance behind us here starts to get a little bit antsy. I don't think Duncan's done anything wrong at all here, he's waited for a really nice gap. There's no way we could possibly have taken any of the gaps before this. The ambulance can't turn right or straight from here, so I'm not really sure what they're hoping to do. Maybe just thinking it's a little bit busy and hoping to take a slightly different route. But Duncan's done absolutely nothing wrong at all with here. Don't let other people pressure you, it's not a problem at all. I've asked Duncan to take the third exit, there's a first one just past us here. The second one coming up just in front of us. Duncan gets a little bit confused with the lanes here. He does check his mirrors, he does signal correctly, he's running a left signal at this point. He really should be moving over to this left-hand lane now. You can see that it does exit straight ahead. Now this black car is fortunately holding back, which does give us time to move over and take the exit here. He could have made his life a little bit easier, but as long as he's done it safely and we've not run the risk of confusing that black car running into it, no problem at all. He's been asked to turn left here. This is quite a quiet roundabout. Fortunately, I don't think he stops here. No, good. No more marks for undue hesitation to finish off, which is all good. Coming towards the end of the test now, I've asked him to take the next road on the right. Does this nicely. He almost turns a bit early, if I remember correctly, and then corrects himself just there, has a little think about it, and decides not to cut massively over the junction, which is brilliant. Bit of an interesting encounter with the cyclist there. He does a nice job of giving them plenty of space before taking the next road on the left. Again, junction work all good, mirrors signal position looking fab. He gives this bike plenty of room as well, deals with his speed really nicely there. It's well prepared for the hazard. I asked Duncan now to pull up on the left in a safe place, and that is going to be the end of his test. He does this quite nicely, checks his mirrors, signals, pulls up in a good position with nothing extra to add to finish the test off. So, just going through the result of Duncan now, giving him the news. Obviously not quite the result we were hoping for today, probably a few more serious faults than we'd like to see, Duncan, but all in all the skills are there. There's a lot of good things there, and a lot of the faults that we're picking up, especially the minors there, a lot of them are just the same one for those roundabouts. If we can get those pesky roundabouts sorted out and deal with a few other little things there, we'll be well on our way to a very good test-ready driver there. A lot of the serious ones, although they were serious faults, are also really easy to fix, and with a couple of hours I'm sure we'll be right back on top of all those things. So, thank you very much for watching. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to pop them down below, and I will try and get back to you as soon as I can. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.